few of these presentations, and they cover a full spectrum of astrology. This particular talk emerged out of an awareness that while diving into the deeper reaches of astrology is really great and exciting and interesting, just getting an overview of what it offers, a very 101 course, the wide angle. We're not strictly learning astrology in any rote way. It's more applications. So as you can see, I'm an astrologer, and I weave that with numerology, and I've been doing it for 20 years professionally. And I have a weekly and yearly horoscope column, which you can access on my website, and I do a newsletter twice a month, usually, new and full moons, and just gives you little bits of insights in terms of current planetary alignments and showing synchronicity, a word that's really important in astrology, which means meaningful coincidences or events coinciding that are meaningful. You've heard the word synchronicity before? Yeah. It's it was coined by Carl Jung, and again, it represents an important theme in astrology, which I'm going to illustrate. So, let's begin. So, one of the reasons I am doing this once again is because I try to explain to people that there's many applications to astrology. So this is just a metaphor, that there's all kinds of applications, because people will show up and they go, okay, just do it, which is great, but that can produce vagueness on their part and mine. So it's hard to target. It's like going to a restaurant going, okay, you're standing at the counter going, okay, right, okay. The person's like, yeah, what do you want? All right, just go. Well, do you want this on the menu, or do you want that on the menu? So there's a big menu that you can have aspects of astrology in a lot of ways, which you'll see. And when I say there's a lot of apps, I mean there's a lot of apps. There are a lot of applications to astrology. It's quite beautiful and remarkable that way. It stretches in a lot of directions, and so while on one hand there's a lot of techniques to decode the chart, that's a more technical version of the story. This is just the plain old applications, the many types of questions you can ask in simplest language. And here's a list of some of them, and there's more. So classically, people are looking for self-awareness, and they'll have health questions, and people have a newborn comes into the world. They're often interested and excited to get some insight about who this person is, who this soul is. Timing and business are classical themes, and turning points in life. Events, that's strongly what people think it's all about, predicting events, but it's not really. That's an area one should be quite careful with as well, because you don't want to auto-suggest a person to be hoping and waiting for something to occur. It doesn't. That can cause a lot of disappointment and so forth. It's very much a co-creation, which I'll explain later. So there's questions of destiny and practically education. What's the best kind of education, which is often linked to career. Then there's questions of location and relocation. Is this a good place for me? And it's interesting, where we are in the world is significant in terms of longitude and latitude. If we live on one side of the country and move to the other, you can cast a chart which shows how you relate to that place. And it goes further than that, because every place has an astrology chart. Like Colville will have a birth chart. Washington will have a birth chart. The United States has a birth chart. Like that. And that's where, like in Canada compared to the United States, we're close cousins for sure, but we're different. There's what makes us different. What is it? The culture, etc. And there are a lot of factors, it's true. But one of them most definitely is linked to our astrology charts of the nation. And just the same in Washington, you may notice a slightly different character or characteristic in the people compared to the next state. Do you think that's true? Yeah, state, a state character. And you'll even notice that in the smallest way in a town like Colville versus the next town over. It's just ever so subtle, right? You have to be there and live there probably to notice it. But you go, oh, the people in that town are all different than the people in that town. And, and you will blend well with some of it and not so well with other places. So it goes on like that. Then there's questions of when to sign, and it goes into deep end like past lives, karma, and those questions can be very interesting and exciting to learn about and valuable, but sometimes challenging to take as well. But it's where you I have this one title for a reading that says, "Give it to me straight." But I tend not to want to do that at first, to tell you the truth. Some people will say, just no bars hold, just tell me the way it is. I'm like, actually, you can't quite handle it. Yeah. You have to be very careful how you say what you say. We need to acclimatize. It's like getting into a hot bath a little bit. Take it in there slow. And current cycle, self-actualization, authenticity gets into a more philosophical theme. But more practically, once again, you can get into real estate questions, relationship, past, present, future, strategy, etc. So there's lots. These are just a smattering of some of the angles. And in a reading, of course, you can get more than one of those. You can get 2 or 3 or 4, depends. Say, okay, I feel pretty good about that. Let me ask you this question. So it doesn't hurt to know that, and if you're going to have a reading, come with a few questions. Now, having said that, and just a brief introduction, another aspect of what astrology can do for you is it can inspire you and perhaps even awaken you and educate you to a larger perspective of reality. This larger perspective of reality includes you. So it's not just some foreign alien point of view and some estranged philosophy. It's very beautiful metaphysical knowledge which shows an intrinsic relationship that we all share with life. So it can be described as a cosmology, a worldview, which again can be described as the foundation or the premise of metaphysics. And when you get into that science of metaphysics, which is sort of the spiritual science, it gets very wonderful and interesting. And one of the most basic precepts is that we live in a conscious universe. Now, that's an important and interesting statement. Most people go, yeah. But mainstream science doesn't. It goes, no. It asserts that we live in a universe that is originally derived from matter, and matter, through a series of mutations, etc., developed into what we know and experience as the universe and life in it. That's a real interesting sale, I think, because just by the very shape of creation, we get a sense that there's something there making that shape. A design. There's a design, there's a designer. That's an old argument. They're prevalent right now in the world, by the way. So we live in a conscious universe, and we have consciousness, and we live in consciousness. So it's an interesting statement. We live in consciousness. You can even take that to a spiritual statement like people will sometimes say, well, where was God? Or where is God? Yeah, a better question is, where isn't God? Where isn't it? It's all-pervasive. Sometimes it's been described as the Holy Spirit, etc. And we can go on and on with that, but the idea is we live in duality. We can, with that, talk about yin and yang, black and white, good and evil, man and woman, all the things you might want to say in terms of dualistic, polarized thinking, and somehow that which brought it into existence is beyond that. It brought the two polarized, dualistic perspectives into existence, so it's beyond that. And so it gets very exciting and interesting to consider that. Now, in a mystical, metaphysical sense, the one sound, the one light, are what is also called the sounding light, is an important phrase that is very primordial. You can even think of thunder and lightning in a very outer sense, but it's more intrinsic, more primordial than that. But we can think of spark and explosion, just like the spark plug. So it's very similar, the sounding light. And the universe as a word is translated into the one song. This suggests that in the beginning was the word or the sound. So I tell you this partially as a very fundamental basis of where and why astrology works. That's what you're learning here. And it produced not only the universe, but what would be called the omniverse. What that means is that the universe is, we can say, has many dimensions in it. It's like having just like our radio or our television, there's many channels. It's as simple as that. There's just many channels. So we don't think of it so singularly anymore, like, let's say, this side and the other side, people will say, which is natural to say the veil that divides us in the physical to the non-physical realm. It's fine to say the other side. But just as is true in the world, there are many places and many zones and sectors, and some higher, some lower in vibration, etc. The same is true on the other side. Many places, many mansions is defined as. Now, we've heard this phrase, and it's an ancient phrase, division and separation are ultimate illusions. Now, in everyday life, through our five senses and our perceptions, we experience division and separation. And that's the politic of life, isn't it? We're all here and there, us and them, you and I, us and them, us and them. Us and them creates all the problems. But that's life, and it's not wrong. Life is meant to be a journey and a process, and arguably, I think it's fairly accurate to say, inevitably, conflict is what life's about. Without conflict, we'd be bored. If we're, that's why we create games like chess. Hey, let's have a conflict. Well, this would be great. Or let's have two teams go at it. Or let's, so conflict, we're always often seeking peace, and we just want it to be done and over. We're a bit missing the point when we do that. Now, we'd all like to see, most people would like to see, humanistic, civil, peace-loving humanity embracing one another, and I would agree. Nobody likes to see violence and mayhem and cruelty and pain, of course. But it is part of the game. And so it's not condoning anything, but we come to accept there's a dualistic reality. And black and white, up and down, here and there, pleasure and pain. I didn't make it up. It was me. So all of this dualistic perspective and this metaphysical, multidimensional reality can be summarized as this word holism. If you think about it, that's where the word holy comes from. Holy is something divine, sacred, and holism is that too. It brings it just a bit more scientific, though, to that perspective. Now, the idea then in this metaphysical model is that, again, there's multidimensional planes, and metaphysical knowledge, or I want to use the word metaphysical a lot because it takes and we can use the word esoteric, it takes the spiritual into a more scientific place. We talk about spiritual, it kind of goes into a fluffy zone of sentimentality sometimes, or other lovely themes like communion and so forth, which are all beautiful, but just this keeps sort of a little structured perspective alive when we say metaphysics. So the involution of spirit into matter culminates on our planet, and not only is our planet multidimensional, we are too. We are made in the image of it being nature. Nature isn't God, but because God created nature. sometimes this is where it gets a little tricky. We won't go into this too much, but when we think of Mother Nature, we get a sentimental notion that it's a feminine mother theme. But really, it's more like a androgynous hermaphrodite. If it's anything, it's both male and female. How could it be one? So that's why some people say Mother, Father, God, and or they'll say the manifest universe, and all kinds of phrases. But what we're really saying is that the manifest universe is structured in a certain way, and it has itself, even the planet itself, has what's called a causal, or that's a source. Causal is what would be another word for the plan. It taps into the blueprint of existence. Like, again, everything in creation has a shape. A shape implies a design. It has a blueprint. And it's always in the Bible been described as the plan. Okay? And that's the sun in that respect, as the center of the solar system, is a divine point, which I'll explain to you in a few minutes. It's very much like the heart in your body, or it's like the nucleus in the cell. It's the brain. It's not just a thing. It's an intelligence. And that's where in ancient civilizations they worship Ra, and not merely some worship of the sun as a thing. They weren't thinking that. They were aware of or invested into the appreciation that the sun was a being, a cosmic being with an intelligence. And this is, so that story, that's just the tip of the iceberg where you get into this understanding of the sun as more than it seems. It certainly is, in a very physical sense, a giver of life. A giver of life. If it wasn't for the sun, we obviously would not be here, and so on. So then we have a mental plane, an astral, that's emotional, a physical, and our body is made the same way. The physical, etheric, astral, mental body. And so it goes up like that. It's just a basic model of our multidimensionality. Now, so that brings in the sun. The moon is a very important planet in a body, in the whole structure of how astrology works. We have the earth. Here we are. We're the earth. We're on the earth. We're in the body. We're multidimensional. The sun is like the heart, the spine, the spark, the intelligence even within our core. People talk about heart intelligence sometimes. And heart intelligence is, you've heard about heart math? You've heard about that? Anyway, the idea is that the reason the heart, they say, is more intelligent or has a faster awareness sometimes than the brain is because the brain's computing with sensory input, okay? But the heart is linked to the auric field. And the auric field's like your radar field. So it can pick up things instantaneously without computation. That's why they say the heart brain has its own intelligence. And it's somewhat linked to instincts and other things, and we can talk about the subconscious mind and so on and so forth, okay? But most basically, the heart has its own intelligence, and so does the brain. And the moon in this whole story is very much like the antenna or the whiskers or the regulator in the car in a traditional mechanical sense. But there's something, even modern cars, that has to organize how all the circuitry works and so forth. So the moon has that. And if there was no moon, there'd be no life. The sun, that's an obvious statement. But we might imagine, well, maybe we can have life on Earth without a moon, but apparently not. That can't happen. So that suggests, by the way, let's say we were to play with the notion of other life in the universe, which seems quite likely. Then inevitably some beings would live on a planet, and they'd be circling the sun, and they'd have a moon. Almost naturally. So you know what that means, basically? Is they would have an astrology system too. Because astrology wasn't so much invented, it was discovered. It was just discovered by observation, watching. Apparently the sun going around in the sky, right? But we know the Earth is going around it, so it's an optical illusion. Which is an important point, by the way, because our perceptual engagement is a part of the story. It's a bit of a paradoxical statement, but it means that we're not just in it, we're it. And, like saying, like, we're God experiencing itself, but the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, which means while we have the spark of the divine, we're not the source ourselves. We belong to the source, we come from the source, but we're not it in its totality, certainly not, but we certainly have a spark of it. So that's that celebration. It gets very lovely and very satisfying to hear that and to remind ourselves of that, because in our ego instinctual mind, we're in survival consciousness all the time, which is very good and valid, but if we are centered there, it's not so great. And it's hard to not be in day-to-day life, right? All the pressures and stresses of living and making a living, the bills and all the pressures of life. But anyway, the moon is this important regulator, and it's very much linked to what's called the etheric body. The etheric body is also known as a grid system. The whole planet has a grid system. We talk about ley lines and pressure points. Our body, too, has ley lines and pressure points. Shiatsu and reflexology show us that, don't they? So it's really wonderful to see how they parallel each other. And the grid is like a very geometrical matrix, and that's where we see in nature everywhere geometrical design, which is the result of the etheric. So which is, one more word on the etheric, it's like a transceiver. It receives and transmits. And it's a beautiful consideration of how we both receive in a cosmic sense. But it's interesting when we go back to what I was showing you, the model of the causal, mental, astral, physical. What we're receiving from partially is, when we think of cosmic, when we think of astrology, it's true. But we're actually receiving from in there. Now, I'm not just talking in my heart. I'm not just talking in my cells. I'm saying that everything out there in the universe, and we're talking about galaxies, we now realize that the universe isn't a galaxy. The universe is an ocean of galaxies. And it's a beautiful understanding, isn't it? Just 100 years ago, we had a concept of the universe as like a galaxy. And now, wow, we're realizing it's a galaxy, it's a universe of galaxies. And who knows how far it goes. Like when sometimes if somebody says the edge of the universe, say, stop right there. That is something that you cannot really say. Who's to say what the edge is, etc. I mean, we can go as far as the optical lenses can see, and maybe we can go that distance again and again, right? Who's to say? So we can't say. So the main point, though, is that everything out there, here's an esoteric important consideration, comes from in there, not out there. Modern science tells us it comes from out there. Where's out there? It actually comes from in there. That's what they mean by source. And when you go, when you hear in there, it's like, what does that mean? And this is where we get into the whole hadron colliders. They're looking into matter, trying to get deeper and deeper, which is fair enough. Why not? On one level, they're curious enough to probe really deeply into the minutiae, right? Into matter, and deeper, and quantum physics, deeper and deeper. It's really amazing. But they're realizing they might not be able to get to the bottom of that, which is really an interesting statement on its own, but also that creation comes from in there. And that's a very hard thing to understand, really, but I would just leave you with that consideration. So we live in a galaxy, and we live in a solar system, which I'm going to explain in a moment. So you get this real cosmological perspective. Now, I love this image. This is called the Hubble Deep Field. What that is showing you is every little smudge, every little point, every little speck, every little thing is a galaxy, not a star. Yeah, and that's just in one direction. Like just taking Hubble and pointing it in one direction and letting it go, like let that electrical optical lens, go, 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 and it goes, oh, and they've done this in all kinds of directions. This is one of their favorites, but they've come to realize there's other mass conglomerate gatherings, shall we say, of galaxies, and this is just like a real slice of it.
So which one is our galaxy?
We're seeing it from here, so we're in it. It's just like,
and to think that many years ago, well, even not so many years ago, we thought we were the galaxy.
yes, that's what I was saying. It's we not 100 years ago we thought the universe was the galaxy was the universe, and that was a lot, already. You look in the stars, but with our eyes we cannot see a galaxy. Never will you see a galaxy if you look in the night sky.
You can see a galaxy, one galaxy with your naked eye.
You can?
It's a little smudge. It's the galaxy.
Andromeda?
Before that, it's M31.
Is it
Andromeda?
Andromeda.
Yes.
Yeah, Andromeda is very large. Yes. You sure you can see it with your naked eye?
Yes. In a really dark sky, it looks like somebody took a star and erased it with an eraser. It's a very diffuse light.
Yeah.
But it's the closest galaxy to the Milky Way.
Okay.
2.2 million light years away.
Right. Yes, beautiful. Okay, well, I was under the understanding you couldn't, but by and large you can. But that is the closest.
That's the only one.
It's much larger than our galaxy, yes. So it's this mind-blowing idea, but it's really exciting. The reason I bring this in is not so much, it's just to kind of stretch our consciousness to a place of the vastness of things. But the main thing actually is it comes all the way back home to our consciousness. We are conscious beings living in consciousness. We're divine spark from the greater glory of existence. So that's what that represents is what can be called a deep sympathetic resonance. A deep sympathetic resonance is what produces synchronicity. It's a paradox. It means that we tend to perceive here and there, us and them, etc., but division and separation are an illusion. So it's a really hard concept to get. There's only now. Sometimes we've heard people talk about, well, whether there's time travel. Well, how could there be time travel when there's no time? There's no such thing as time. Time is a measurable thing that we measure, and we can talk about it, but what I mean is, you can't go into the past or the future. You can go into memory in the past, and you can go into hypothesis in the future. Okay, you can go on a journey of imagination. But let's say you went into the past. Whose past are you going to? Whose past? What past? And can you interact? No. You can go into, but you could go into a record field. It's like you're there watching a movie of what went on. Can you interact? So that's a question, and so some people say you can, but I side with the argument, no, you can't, because there's only now. That's a real hard concept to grasp. There's only ever now, but our perception measures it as past, present, future. So that's what I would have offered. But in any case, this is as though we are journeying from the universe. Okay, so it's like we're, whoops, okay, hang on, sorry about that. I'll just get back to this wrong buttons. Yeah, it's like we're in that galactic field. We live in one of those, and that's what those are. Then imagine we were heading towards, in a spaceship, our solar system. So although it wouldn't have this auric field, it might as well have, because in the scientific model, there is a way of looking at the solar system as having, there's the sun, there's the planets around it, but the energy field of the sun reaches out into space and has like epidermal layers like the skin. It has a membrane. So we have this, the helial pause, the termination shock, the bow shock has layers, whatever you wish to call them, but those are the scientific technical terms. So you get this notion that in a cosmic perspective, metaphorically, the whole solar system is like a cell. The entire solar system is like a cell. And it's a, now is a cell has a little nucleus right there, right? It's just like the solar system, right? So you get into this now, is there intelligence in the cell? Everybody goes, well, yeah. Is there intelligence here and not here? No. The whole cell is intelligent. That's right. Now, if the whole cell is intelligent, what do you think about this whole thing? The whole, we're talking about a solar system. Is the whole solar system intelligent? Indeed. That's what is called holism. Is the whole galaxy intelligent? Indeed. It must be. Because it works, it's all consciousness, but consciousness has a way of centralizing itself. It's what they call particle and wave. So on one hand, from a particle perspective, it centralizes. From a wave perspective, all the galaxies are like cells in the mind of consciousness in the universe. You want to call that goddess or God, whatever you want to call it, go for it, right? Go crazy. But it's just going to be a label. And so you see, wow, it's like, wow, consciousness, holism, that's what holism means. Very exciting. And so we get back to the planet Earth, and it itself is it's like a being. It has dimensional layers. This is so the planet can be called a planetary lord. The sun is called a solar lord. Now these are just words, and religion and theologies might emerge around that, which is fine. Or we can take a scientific way of describing it, which is fine. But the notion that one description is better than the other is just hubris, pride, arrogance, if you like. And that's prevalent out there. And or the entire, however you wish to look at it, it all has a consciousness. And it's what they call, and you've heard this before if you have any background knowledge into what's called holism. Holism is basically the understanding that every whole is contained with a greater whole. Like a cell can be you, hypothetically, or I, could be cloned with one cell. That's what Jurassic Park's all about, right? One cell, reproduce. Now, they're doing it already, aren't they? With sheep. And now, we're probably not far from cloning ourselves. And that's a little scary. And there's movies are doing a great job of stretching our imagination toward what we think about that and all that good stuff, right? Very exciting. So, but the point is that the wholes within wholes principle applies, and that's what holism's about. It's very exciting. And you're getting into an understanding of holism, which celebrates what's called fractals. Fractals are one slice of the whole, but they're reverberating. It's actually called iteration. So as an astrologer, I go beyond the usual interest in astrology. I want to know how and why it works, and it stretches my consciousness. It's philosophical, spiritual, like I'm showing you, okay? This is partially what it can do for you, is it introduces you to your cosmic self, or the reality of you as just an ego personality, but connected to a cosmic reality. It's very spiritual, if you think about it. It's very mind-blowing, but it can be very exciting. And it's a real wonderful thing to consider. Now, now we talk about the dimensions, and there's like what they call veils. What I showed with the many clocks is, while I believe you can't travel in time, I also believe, though, that you could travel, if you could travel from this dimension to another dimension, you can be in that time. That's a different statement. You can't travel into past, present, future as such, only hypothetically and imaginatively. But if you could go into another dimension, you would be in their time. Wouldn't that be exciting? And hypothetically, I think that's much more realistic to consider. And perhaps I believe, in fact, that when people ask, what's the meaning of life? And the meaning of life is for us to become responsible co-creators. Why? So we develop a certain level of responsibility, maturity, and capacity, what would be in we're at great mastery, really, so that we can become more privy, we would have more access to multidimensionality. Now that's an interesting consideration, isn't it? It's a little bit more interesting than live, die, and go to heaven and la-di-da. Okay, which sounds kind of fun on one hand, or elsewhere, or nowhere, right? But if we start to think that it's more interesting than that, it gives life a certain rhyme and reason. It doesn't force us to achieve in the marketplace so hard and, this is one life, just go for it. Although we are pushed by our destiny to achieve things, but in the end you can't take with you. So what's its value? It has to be intrinsic. You understand? I mean, what do you take with you? Your lessons, your wisdom, your abilities, your mastery, everything. And that's what we go back to, that model of the causal. That's also another word, or it works closely with what's called the akashic. You heard that word before? Yeah, that means the memory bank of your soul. There's a lot of spiritual things that I'm just touching on, so just be aware of that. But it's quite an interesting story. But getting back to it, we talk about dimensions, and it's very exciting. But in fact, and for all intents and purposes, we're here, we have this body, and there's a rhyme and reason to that. That's what I really want to bring home. Is that while it's fine to think about other realities, we want to be here. And also, people talk about, there's another thing called parallel universes, and they sort of have this notion that it repeats, and I think, well, that's just boring and stupid. No, repeat, no, because, that's like, well, maybe there's another me out there. Well, if there is, I don't know, because I'm thinking about it here, right? So what's the big deal? It's no, but is there other dimensions and other pockets of reality which are radio station-like frequencies away? I would go with that. What I was hinting at, I didn't complete a sentence I wanted to share with you. Modern day mathematics, in modern day mathematics, one of its branches is called chaos theory. Chaos theory, interestingly, approached the notion of chaos and order, because in Western science, the basic understanding was there's chaos, and then out of chaos comes order. Chaos theory comes along and says, okay, let's study this, and let's try and understand. What they discovered is this. No, chaos comes from order. Order does not come from chaos. That is a revolutionary thing, and that's only 20 years old. But interestingly enough, from what I can tell, it's relatively hush-hush. Bit of a conspiracy statement there. It's there to study, but it's a bit, hey, don't make that one too loud, okay? Because if we realize that chaos comes from order, then we have to study where's the order. When we get into order, what we get into is the plan. We're back to God, and that is a real kick in the ass for the scientific community. It is. It's like, well, we don't like that God thing, And I think it's what I think in the most positive sense that in this entire revolution, scientific revolution, is about, in the metaphysical, spiritual, or philosophical sense, is to diminish the notion of this anthropomorphic God, the punishing man, Jupiter image, the mythological. Let's dismiss that. Okay, now let's get into universal consciousness and get back into the game. And then but we're still going to get to a plan. And I'll show you in a little while why it's so evident. It's almost ludicrous to think that there couldn't be a plan. But even beyond all I say that with great conviction, partially because I see how astrology works. It's like, oh my God, this should not work according to linear science. Okay, it should not. But it does. There's nothing absolute about it, but it works enough to show there's a synchronicity. Okay, and you go, oh, if that's happening, then I'm sorry. And that's really a kind of odd and strange place to stand when the bulk of the mainstream is marching along with a scientific conviction, and they go, oh, that astrology is nonsense. And I want to say, is that your scientific opinion? And if they say yes, you say, no, that's not science, that's religion. That's the religion of your linear brain. Linear mind religion. In other words, you've never studied it, you don't know anything about it, but you already throw it away dogmatically. Scientists always call each other dogma. They always accuse each other of being dogmatic. They're just human beings like everybody else. So we're all have our little biases. Okay, no big deal. But when we get to models like here we are human beings and living in this multi-dimensional reality, and we're made in the image of it, like they say in the Bible and other spiritual texts and so forth, right? We get into this notion of understanding, well, we have chakras. Now, chakras aren't just maybe, they're measurable. They're even measurable by sound. And for example, you go, ah, you feel it here. If you go, here. Go, up here. If you go, oh, it's down here, ooh. And it's really interesting, those are 5, although there's 7 chakras. But anyway, sound makes chakras activate. And that's what chanting and all that in spiritual traditions is about. But anyway, I call the chakras your 7-prong plug into the etheric as a transceiver principle. So it's really interesting metaphysics, very interesting cosmology, and this is ancient understanding, and very spiritual and beautiful, and it has a metaphysical or spiritual scientific basis to it. Now, so we're made in the image of God, nature, the universe, whatever you wish to call it once again. I've come up with these 7 key words. It is, and therefore we are, or ideally would be, conscious, intelligent, creative, loving, intentional, purposeful, cooperative. We all are. All of you are doing this, aren't you? Now, you'd like to be maybe more conscious, more intelligent, more creative, more loving, more intentional, more purposeful. Who doesn't want more? Right? We would like all of that. Wouldn't you like to have more of that in your life, in your relationships? Right? But now, when I say that, it's just a thing of, these are very quality, just 7, like the chakras, very quality statements, and it's very lovely to consider that if we just increase that. But basically what I'm saying is we're made in its image, and these are the 7 points that we're seeking to achieve in our lives. It keeps it simple. It's a simple model. Now, it's from a very wide angle. This is a bit blurry. It says the entire universe. They actually take, I don't have this image. This one's an example of it. But when they take the lenses of the Hubble and really make it wide angle, it creates a very synapse web. The galaxies are so, they're like what you saw before as points is one version of the story, but then they look even wider. It starts to look like a web like this, or with concentration points, like they gather more in some places. Follow what I'm saying? It's a real mind stretch what I'm saying, I realize. But the point is, that's exactly what's going on in our very own brain. It's an interesting thing. So that's the bigger stretch. Now I'll just leave it there now. That's a hard one to really get. But the idea is, once again, the entire universe is conscious, and it's all oneness ultimately. So each, once again, galaxy is like a brain cell, and then within the galaxy, it has a bunch of, the galaxy itself is a whole conscious entity, and within it has suns or stars, and they're like the brain cells in it. And then we, on a planet around one of those suns, which is like a cell, and it holds a whole consciousness. Then we come down to us. We have billions of cells. So it's this beautiful parallel principle. Now, we come back to the sun. The sun, or any star, is a focal point of this divine, conscious, creative intelligence. So remember those 7 words? And it's working not only intelligently, creatively, consciously, but also lovingly, cooperatively, intentionally, and so forth. So we get, well, okay, the whole universe is always doing that. And this is a really beautiful understanding. And how do we know it's always doing it? It's because that we're here. It's working. It works. Even though there's anomalies and weather and this and that, and, even cataclysms and so forth in history, sure. But it works, doesn't it? It's like this great miracle. So now, we are therefore spiritual beings, souls having human experiences. We're souls incarnate. Do you believe that? Most people, they hear that, they go, yeah, duh, people who are very educated don't always, though. They've been dumbed down. Education can be a massive program that dumbs you down, believe it or not. Now, I say that with humility because when I was in school, I wasn't one of those A students who work real hard, and I appreciate intelligence, and they're bright. There's nothing wrong with being bright. Nothing wrong with having a high IQ. There's nothing wrong with having a PhD or two. There's nothing wrong with all those good things. Fantastic, beautiful. But on the other hand, sometimes that very thing can cause a block. It's too much linear cognitive, not enough intuitive knowing. So, we come back to us in our mental, emotional, etheric, physical body. This is what's happening right now, this multidimensional vehicle. And it is woven with what's called archetypal intelligence. This is something of what I was talking about when I said the etheric body. Okay, so this weave of archetypal intelligence is what perhaps is what they mean by archangels. Now you see, sometimes people talk about angels and archangels and, like Gabriel and Michael and Raphael and all these things. But, and it's tempting, again, to think of them as personalities, with egos and big muscles and wings. It's hard not to, right? We've been really bombarded, and it's fine, animation and imagination and endeavors to depict things. But really, probably, the archangels are massive vibrational frequency zones. Like, say, Gabriel or Michael or Raphael or whoever. They're probably levels of consciousness that are part of that divine mind. And that's probably what's going on. So this is not the easiest thing to depict. So what I'm showing here is these images are what would be an example of fractals. There's this very wonderful design-based sort of shape, theme, and we, as humans, basically are a byproduct of the weave of those, the synthesis. It's remarkable how perfect it works. It's a miracle. So all of this realization now, what basically I'm talking about realization in a very quick, rather brief, but mind-bending, stretching, flowing perspective that we just took. We come to this realization, yes, I'm a soul incarnate. That's fairly evident. And as a soul incarnate, when I understand that, that can really help me overcome materialism, nihilism, depression, despair, aimlessness, addiction. Do you notice that those things are fairly prevalent in society? And you know why? It's what they call
I've never heard of that.
nihilism. Nihilism means it's all meaningless. There's nothing. It's all just a big don't take it seriously. It's all meaningless. It's like, okay, yeah, right, meaningless. Yeah, that means you haven't really given it much thought, is what I would say. Nihilism is just a wave away. It's just kind of waving off it. It's just silly people with big imaginations think it means anything. They're kind of psychopaths, really. Nihilistic thinking is the byproduct of the psychopathic mind, really. Not necessarily homicidal, but psychopathic. Kind of their heart chakras kind of switched off, really. They're not able. There's no empathy. There's no intuition. There's no connection. There's no communion. So it's really probably a fun place to live. They just live in their cerebral cortex sort of thing. In any case, it's when I say it's when I say conspiracy, I'm not talking specifically about a particular political group. What would be more negative dark force energy? Just negative dark force energy is separative, divisive, and so forth, dividing, and it could basically be called lower mind, but it exists within life, and it's very predatory. So it's that part of our us that wants to prey on us, and it becomes this whole complex set of thinking or economic structuring, etc., which is what is classically called divide and conquer. Do you think that divide and conquer operates in society? I can assure you it's operative. But it doesn't mean it's only operative, and we also have order and structure. But it's just, and again, no blame to anybody, it's just the game of life. The dark and the light. The light is seeking order. The dark is always trying to produce subterfuge or perspective or look over there. It's kind of, trying to win the game, and will win at any cost. But that is the game of life. Now, beyond that, but this spiritual consciousness, my mother always said, when I was younger, she knew I was very idealistic and I was very concerned with how things were in the world. She says I should join the Peace Corps or something, and I said, Mom, it's not. I don't doubt the value and the beauty and the purpose of somebody in the Peace Corps, right? It's all great. It's just that I said it's not about that. It's about consciousness. It's about being reminded about what we are, and invariably that awakens consciousness, and that's my contribution. I want to do that, not necessarily go on helicopters and help people who are drowning in the ocean. Wonderful as that is on its own ground, right? Nothing's better than anything else. It's just different. It comes back to this spiritual understanding and all this, the good spiritual consciousness. Not exactly just every preacher. Again, there's a kind of a sales going on at times. Life too, it's all good. But we're engaged in a creative process simply because we exist is the point I'm wanting to make. It's not that I'm just doing something creative just because I'm alive. I'm already involved in a creative process because the creative process is everywhere. And most prevalently in nature, right? Like society is creative and it functions with certain amounts of order and rules and laws and wonderful feats of art and everything. It's all great. And we do that. And while we, empires and societies rise and fall, and there's certain similarities. We need a certain amount of roads and food, clothing, shelter, and currency, and all this basic thing. And all the while, nature is just perfect and divine in its order, and etc. Right? So, and within this statement, by the way, is this rather beautiful, important statement. We're not just in nature. We are nature. We are nature, aren't we? We are nature experiencing itself. We just so happen to be a certain kind of species called human with sentience. That's really exciting, isn't it? So now, coming closer and closer, and taking you closer and closer to a place called an astrology chart with this big, wide cosmological perspective. We've often heard this word destiny, fate, free will. Hollywood, I create my own destiny. You may co-create it, though. Not create it absolutely. No. And I would offer that it's more of a co-creation, just like in the 7 words, the cooperation. But to the degree that we create our own destiny, that's like the inflated ego. It's out of touch. There's no communion. There's no unity. There's no harmony. There's no humility. There's no anything. It's just guns and kind of a sort of an impossible bravado. That's just Hollywood. You follow? We see it, right? Those heroes never seem to take a bullet. Not often enough, at least. It's almost refreshing when you see the hero take a bullet or get beat up, right? You're like, this is a real movie. Anyway, the notion of either or is the delusion. In other words, destiny includes fate and free will. It is our destiny to use our free will, and it's our destiny to have a certain amount of predetermined probability is the key word, at play. Now what's really nice about that is that it's like, I like to use the metaphor of you're on a river and it has a current, you're in a boat, and you have paddles, or a motor if you like. You can go anywhere you want, and you can zip around, you can go against the current, you can go and hit the rapids, you can do anything you want, right? But the river has this, and taking your boat Um, out of the river is your prerogative, but it's not going to be that fun. Now you're out of the river, you're out of the game. So the fate is a probability stream that everybody has, and it's not the simplest thing to define, but it's there for everybody. So now here we are as free will beings, having choice and creative intelligence, and that's what we're here to learn. So definitely it's a celebration of free will and choice. And that's very, very important. And what I want you to understand with this is this, that in my interest and focus with astrology, I want to increase and inspire and empower your free will choice, not simply predict your future. It's very important to understand that. But I'm going to do it in such a way as to help you to understand that there's a destiny and a plan and already things in place that you can work with. And you're already doing it intuitively, instinctively, and so forth, rationally, all good. But we do it somewhat a little less consciously than we might otherwise like to. It's really just like this, just a prerogative thing. Would you like to be a bit more conscious or a bit more in touch with that? And sometimes even if we have more awareness and we're more in touch with our free will, it doesn't mean that our life is going to radically change and suddenly we have 6 digits and we're living in Malibu. No, not necessarily, because somehow our destiny and fate brought us to Colville. And it's all good, right? It's all cool. And there's no need, there's no, I mean, it's nice for us all to dream of being in other places, but when you're there too. Wherever you go, there you are. And if you suck, it sucks there too. Couldn't help but say that. You know, wherever you go, there you are. Anyway, so now we have a destiny, and we're plugged into this big, grand cosmic plan, but we have free will. Now, what this free will implies, though, is that we're inherently responsible for our part in our participation. Okay. And this reveals a root essence of intrinsic reality of the word karma. Karma means, you know, see, she's touching the water, right? See the ripples? That's karma. There's nothing you can do that's not going to create karma. This is karma. Karma just means cause and effect. And if I were to see air, if I could see the air right now, it'd be swirling, wouldn't it? If it was like smoke, it'd be swirling, yeah? So it's always happening. It's really kind of exciting in that regard. So there's nothing that isn't karma, and there's nothing you do that doesn't cause karma. There's nothing to be afraid of regarding karma. Just simply a Sanskrit word that means cause and effect. But the Sanskrit word karma adds that it transcends time and space. So in other words, there's an immediacy of karma right now, swirling air. That's just a superficial kind of karma, no big deal. But the sum total of our choices in our life produce deeper karma, but it's nothing to be afraid of because there's no escaping the fact that you're creating it. So what do you want to do? Create good karma. As simple as that. Now that kind of begs the question: what's good karma? And good karma, I would argue, is living in alignment with yourself. No belief, no ism, no nothing out there. It's all about. And that's a sort of relative statement too. But still, the point is there. Okay, now, part 3, metaphysics and dimensionality. So here we are, we're souls incarnate, and the fact that we reincarnate means that we have a dharma karma pattern. Dharma means destiny, again, Sanskrit word, but it encompasses more than the word in English does. It's just a beautiful word, and it rhymes with karma, so it's really nice. So our natal chart now measures and illustrates and reveals this fact that there's a karma dharma, a destiny that creates a natal chart. And guess whose natal chart this is? That was really tuned in. Yes, I thought I'd bring the chart of Justin Trudeau. I was going to tell you that, but I didn't. Now, you know, this fellow was born with a bit of silver spoon in his mouth, right? Born to the prime minister and lived in sort of bit of the lap of luxury, even though his life had drama. Look at that nice little Star of David in that chart. So this is, you think, well, that's a pretty good karmic pattern, basically, yeah? And I go, yeah, that's pretty nice. And if I go deep into that chart, I can see all kinds of things by all the particular planets in signs. There you have planets, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Mercury, Jupiter, Sun, Venus, Mars, what's called Chiron, Moon, Saturn. These are called the nodal axis, the moon's nodes, which is another important part of astrology, and it links it directly with the notion of karma and destiny, by the way. But we won't go too much into this because I didn't want to teach you any technical points, more just big, wide, and deep story. But planets in signs and houses, and there's aspects. Planets, signs, houses. There's 1, 2, 3. You'll find 12 slices in the pie. They're called fields. Signs are like thematic, and then you have aspects. You go planets, signs, houses, aspects. 4. There's more to astrology, but it's like saying noun, verb, adjective, and adverb. It's kind of like saying that. Okay, or you can say actor, theme, setting would be the houses, plot. That's an interesting, nice little, what they call nutshell. Okay, but there's an astrology chart, just in case you've never seen an astrology chart before, just gives you a quick glimpse at this mandala. A mandala means like a circular sort of thing. They don't always have to be circular strictly, but generally it's some kind of shape like that, and it's divided into 4, then 8, or whatever. You know, it can be any amounts of wonderful divisions, and usually they're equal. So now part 4, archetypes and sacred geometry. So we'll get back to that. So this is where the understanding of multidimensionality and archetypes come back to the fore. So now here we are, as human beings, we live in the solar system, which is like this. We're in it and it's in us. You heard that? This is very metaphysical, sort of paradoxical. We live in the solar system, but the solar system is like a great cell of consciousness. And in an interesting way, while we live in it, for all intents and purposes, we might as well say it lives in us. That's a hard one for the linear brain to get. What I'm trying to say, though, is because we're so in it, and we're here, but it's so in us, and I don't know how to say it, and that's what the word archetypes means. See, we are made in the design of us is the same as the design of the planets, in that, simply in that, although I don't look like a planet, it's simply that I have a design. Does a planet have a design? Like it's a sphere. And if you go into the planet real closely, you're going to get into, whether you get into the structure of it at a molecular level or whatever, you're going to go, oh my God, the very elements in me, the periodic table in me, is in that. You understand? That's what's called sympathetic resonance. And it gets very exciting. So we don't just live in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe. All of the above live in us in their own archetypal way. And that's not just a metaphor, but it's a mind bend. It's a paradox. Best way to describe it. So, mystical tradition informs us that the sound and the light, which we mentioned in the beginning, constitute the activating source of creation. And we get the brain has synapses on the planet at every single second, all day long. There's a thunder and lightning storm going on all over the place. It's just the way it is. It's not just happening somewhere, nowhere else. I mean, it does do that. It's moving around, but it's always happening somewhere. So it's never not happening. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And same as within our own brain. Right now, electrochemical firing. Very exciting. So the source is actually said to exist in the furthest reach of inner dimensionality. See how metaphysical that gets? The core, and it pervades all of creation. So it's in there and it pervades all of creation. So however you wish to depict that and illustrate it is up to you, but here's some examples in nature. Nature has this marvelous little way of being very precisely organized. It doesn't mess around. See that fingerprint right there? Interestingly enough, same shape as the galaxy. If you think that's merely a coincidence, think again. If you see, if we think too linearly, we think, oh, that's just a coincidence. It's like, no. That's just your brain creating little boxes, and they're separate. There's a box, there's a page of boxes, and you're not seeing the boxes as having connection. They're just separate boxes. What we're doing now is called connecting the dots of the boxes. Okay, this is dot connecting. Okay, but nature illustrates it, goes, it's like what I would call a no-brainer. The evidence of intelligence design pervades nature, and it's in us. And it's not only in that, the chakras are doing the same thing. The chakras and all parts of our being, but when we get into our fingerprints, it's very kind of special, isn't it? You know that, isn't it remarkable that everybody has their own fingerprint too? That's crazy. And no, two sunflowers are quite the same. Okay, it's getting carried away, but it's true, and we all heard that. And it goes into more elaborate designs. This is, by the way, you know what this is? This is Venus from the perspective of the Earth. Over 8 years, Venus has in its orbit a particular rhythm. That's what Venus does over 8 years from the perspective of the Earth. That's a rather important statement. That is because the Earth, we're in it, and it's not as random and arbitrary as we think. Sometimes we tend to. And we get to all kinds of little principles. This is a crash course in enlightenment. Right there. Yes, sir. And this is what's in the sacred geometrical sciences, very ancient. They go into the celebration of these things as this, and this is what's called the flower of life. There's the flower of life. Everybody hear the flower of life? Okay, well, if you might enjoy going online and go flower of life, and once you open that door, you're into sacred geometry land, and it's not hard for you to understand. There's no math for you to understand. There's no formulas. It's all images. And it's going to take you into this world, and it's going to show you how all the design of nature ultimately is. The flower of life, I'll just say this briefly, is 28 spheres that create this like shape. And when they intersect, where they intersect, if you took 28 bubbles and you can put them together in like a sphere, it's like a round, and they were, where they intersect, every geometrical shape in nature is in there. That's what the flower of life is. So if you want to really get, really excited about things in an intellectual way, go to the flower of life, which again is the essence of sacred geometry, and you'll know and you'll learn quickly that it goes all the way back to the most ancient of times. The ancients knew. So see what we're convincing ourselves, what we're being convinced of in mainstream society, is that we're getting smarter and smarter and smarter. That's not necessarily true, by the way. Now, I will agree that our technology is definitely changing and in some respects getting better, and I'm not going to argue that, okay? But it's not strictly true. There's a whole revolution of history saying we used to be smarter, believe it or not. Now, that's not a negative statement. It's just things go in cycles. But we all basically do, most of the people have a sense that the pyramids are something remarkable. We can't make them still. Can't make a pyramid yet. There's a whole story behind that, but I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to keep it here. So now, yeah, it's a really interesting story, but it's again linked to our multidimensionality. And the idea, I'll just say it briefly. You're all basically all Christian educated. You heard about the fall. The fall means, basically, I would offer, and I've studied this quite a bit, this is my understanding, we were in a higher dimensional level of consciousness before, and we fell. And why, and who, and why, okay, that's not something we're going to get into, but I just want to encourage that consideration. And we built the pyramids when we were in that higher dimension. They weren't just built 5,000 years ago. I go with that, and there's just too much surrounding it. But again, another story. Now, here we are. We're conscious beings living in consciousness, and we have perception. We have perception. We're in it, and it's in us. We can say life is a miracle of ongoing creative wonder where we experience reality by way of paradoxes of perception. That's what we're talking about. Paradoxes of perception. We're in it, and it's in us. So we're in the universe, and the universe is in us. This is what they mean by no division. Although we're ultimately, though, one with the source of creation, as in we are it, experiencing itself, we also possess a state of individuality. This, again, is a paradox. It's also the root feature of genuine mysticism. In other words, genuine mysticism says, I'm in it and it's in me, and my spiritual practice is to dissolve the boundary of my linear mind, which is a dividing, sorting, categorizing, differentiating, separating function. That's what your brain's doing. Dividing, sorting, categorizing, differentiating, separating. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's beautiful, it's creation, it's intention, it's what we're here for. However, if we want to go into, let's say, mystical consciousness, we want to stop that happening so that we go into basically what's called the sixth sense, which is maybe a synthesis of all five, but it's even more than that. It's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts perspective. In effect, the lower mind doing all of those sensory perceptual data stops, and if we practice, apparently we come more into what would be a kind of a communion state. I would like to offer, though, I don't think that's the meaning of life. I don't think the meaning of life is for us to go into mystical states of consciousness and become all aware of it. It's like, no, that's not. Actually, the meaning of life is to know that we're from that and we have it in us, but then to come back and use our five senses. Because we have them. If we didn't have them, what would we be doing with them, right? You understand what I mean? I mean, that's where I think some mysticism, some Eastern traditions, or even the notion of being in the body is sort of not good, or, there's all kinds of warped minds through religion, and I think that's very valid, where sort of various, whether it's science or whoever says, you're getting carried away, but any field of endeavor can get carried away too. That is true of astrology too. No question. Anything can get out of balance and proportion beyond its purpose and function. So anyway, there's this magical mysticism in the science and vice versa. Modern day science a number of years ago reached this pinnacle point in its quantum physics investigation, and it says the only words we can use to define what we're seeing is magical, mystical, and matrix. That's the three words that were used by the chief, kind of this main high-level physicist. He says, magical, mystical matrix? That's what I'm going to tell you I see? Ah, right. So you see, we're back full circle. The science has become spiritual, and the spiritual is becoming science. And isn't that where we're at right now? And isn't that very exciting? And we're right there. We're all alive right now at this epic moment when, wow, they're emerging. So how exciting is that? And now, coming back to ground zero, fate is woven into this synchronicity. There's this life is a symphony of synchronicities. Is a phrase I love. A phrase I pretty much coined, quite frankly. It's just this ongoing field of synchronicity. In other words, recognizing synchronicity is is the anomaly. In other words, synchronicity is not anomalous, it's constant. Seeing it is anomalous. See what I mean? It's the opposite of what we think. So anyway, synchronicity, meaningful coincidences or events that coincide meaningfully, is woven into fate. That means that our life, in another sense, has a rhyme and reason, a time and a season. So now, we come back to this understanding that we're souls. From a soul level, we've had many past lives, and will have many future lives. Do you believe that? It's okay, no need to believe, of course, go ahead. But it's amazing how often I say, do you believe in past life? They go, yeah. Like that. But that said, it's not like I feel very confident about it, but I'm not saying everybody should. The idea, though, is there. But here's the trick. Each life we have is an incarnation of the soul having a handshake with this biogenetic unit. In other words, there's two souls. One's the world soul, the biogenetic root mat lineage, which has memory, your genes. Even though they're not fixed, they're probable, right? I'm like my mother and my father in certain ways, not only in my physical, but even in my psychological, in some ways. Okay, but my soul has past and has a plan and a purpose. Oh, my next set of lessons can be realized through that mother and father, in that family, in that, after those 2 or 3 sisters, or before those 2 or 3, or whatever, you know what I mean? It's a whole spectrum of realities that go into it, in terms of family networks, etc. But anyway, the two, spirit soul, I call it. The spirit soul is the soul that has lifetimes here and there and everywhere. And it jumps into the linear root mat, and it has this life. And for all intents and ppurposes, this life is the life you're living as you who knows you know yourself as you. So you go, okay, I should, in effect, or ideally would, at least, go, okay, I'm here. And of course, not being here is this mysterious question. If I'm not here, am I not anywhere? Or am I somewhere? You know what I mean? The idea is this. The idea mystically is, and it's been said, is that when we die, we still have consciousness. We still have a mind. We just don't have a mind. That's it. Just like I said, the causal, mental, astral, etheric bodies, they're called bodies, and physical. So if this goes, where do they go? That's the whole thing. That's where the science comes in. So I'm going to encourage you to consider that you're a soul incarnate and you reincarnate and you have many lives. In fact, I've done studies. You know, when you hear about old souls and young souls, and do you think there's old souls? Well, do you think there's young souls? Infant souls, baby souls, young souls, mature souls, old souls. There's every soul level. And there's a whole echelon of how that works. And you know, in mystical traditions, in the metaphysical department, you're now in kind of the mathematics department. Astrology is a form of mathematics of sorts. Okay, and so is numerology. So the numerology, in astrology, there's the 12 generally, and then in numerology there's the 9, but there's also that number, the 7. See that, the 7? And there's the 7 rays of light, etc. So it's another model of thinking. There's lots of models, but the 7 rays presents this notion that there's 7 soul types, and you have to master each one. And each one takes about 120 lives. So it's a model, and I can't prove it as such, but I've done studies on it to go, I can see what they're talking about, and I can appreciate that. Anyway, it gives a certain amount of lifetimes as probability, which is the lowest would be about 600, and it can go up to 1500. But that's what's the round of many lives which causes you to be, what leads you to graduate from this school. You know, when we talk about life is filled with lessons, well, if there was no soul and there was no rhyme or reason, why would we care about lessons? We wouldn't care, would we? It's like, get out of the way. And there's people who don't care about lessons. They only care about objectives. And that's a problem, actually. But anyway, we're here to evolve. We're souls incarnate. We're here to evolve. Stupid you are. Divine, but stupid. Much you have to learn. So this means we are here to grow, and we have to learn, and we have to cultivate wisdom, skill, ability, mastery, and responsibility as a conscious co-creative being. We're getting into the meaning of life, and it has very tangible applications. And it's not just, the meaning of life is not just the meaning you give it, but the meaning you give it is important too. Your perception, your interpretation, your self-concept, etc. is important. So, this part 7, reality and the purpose of your life on Earth. Now, all of that cool, cosmic, mind-bending, mind-blowing, mind-stretching perspective of the paradox of we're in it and it's in us and we're souls incarnate, it's all there. It's just want to give you that, and that's what astrology can do for you on its own ground in an expanded sense. But how many people get to that? No, they don't in astrology books. They go into signs and squares and aspects, which is great, but they're into the mechanics and or the psychology, but not into the cosmology. That's what I want to share with you. So it already gives you something there. But you're not going to go to an astrology reading and hear all that, and your hour's up, and wasn't that cool? So your life has meaning and it has a purpose. Definitely you feel that, but you don't always know it. It's hard to know, and it's hard to decipher. And, while we have a destiny, we also have free will. And that's a core feature of destiny. That's, again, a very important way of looking at it. So there's many, when we think of destiny, we can say there's many pages, chapters, and stories to it. So it's not this singular thing. It's not this narrow thing. It's more complex. Your destiny is like a very rich story. It's a nice way of looking at it, isn't it? It's not narrow. Because sometimes we think it's straight and narrow. People don't like the notion of, hey, don't tell me that I have this little narrow, rigid destiny. I'm following my destiny. No. The destiny is rich and full and elaborated. It's not narrow and squeezed. So as souls, incarnate, learning lessons, but we're here in this life, and the emphasis is on this life. We talk about past lives, we talked about prospectively future lives. Who knows? Yes, it's true. Past life regression is a wonderful therapy, by the way, and or experience. But it's all about being here now. It's what it means to me if I have a memory of past lives, etc. So it's about my daily life in this life. That's what it's all about. And we have choices, Now, this is just to give an example of maybe sometimes we lose our focus with what's important. But it's not meant to be a judgment. It's just that, we live in a consumer society, and that's good on one hand. But that's what I meant a little bit about that divide and conquer. There's an element of wanting to keep everybody just a little bit what they call dumbed down. Now there's nothing wrong with the goodies of life, but at what point do we lose the point? Right? That's the thing. That's the whole thing. And it's not for me to say or judge. It isn't. But my attitude is this: how are you? How are you? It's not my business how are you. But in my business, when people come to me, astrology as a tool for me is a tool that's designed to help you to be happier, more inspired, more empowered, more fulfilled. That's why I'm what's called a life coach astrologer. I'm not simply interested in predicting. I want to help you see yourself, know yourself, even if that's just an affirmation. You go check. Yes, that's me. That's me. And that a person feels really good just by affirmation, let alone what could be called advice or guidance or insight, etc. So here we are as human beings, and we're dealing with, the should I or shouldn't I consideration. Right, left, up, down, higher road, lower road. And again, it's not for me to judge. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. It's life too. So it's all good. It's all God. But, we can talk about things like value versus action. And in other words, we have a purpose. We want something. We have a desire. And we want to act on it. And how should we? When should we? Etc. These are questions that come up, but that can be answered when we have a deeper sense of our destiny. So now our heart chakra, which is literally linked to the sun, the brain in there, okay, that's what's called the master chakra. What? 3 above and 3 below. It's like when the TV goes on, like that. Yeah, this is the master chakra. This connects us to the universe too. You can be very attuned to the cosmos and things, the rhythm of nature and so forth. And this allows you to engage in a very penetrating way, to see into things, to have insight. This is creativity. Okay. This is your conviction, your belief. This is your ground and your passion to be here, etc. Okay, in a very grounded, earthy way. But this is your inner voice, your intuition, etc., etc. That's basically the heart chakra. Now, but the point partially of that is that in life, we can lose touch with that, our intuition. We get into either instincts and all kinds of upsets and emotional turns, right? Not every day is as good as the next, is it? and each day can be up and down. So, and that's sometimes woven within our biorhythm. But anyway, the main point is now with this image is that in life, everything is a relationship. Everything. The primary relationship's with you, but secondarily it's sort of with you, that significant other in your life, or your parents, or your children, or your relatives, or your neighbors, or your colleagues, or your community, or whatever. But it's all about relationships. And now what we want to understand here is that relationships can be recognized as a vehicle for evolving. We don't just want to have relationship, we want to create relationship. It's much easier said than done, though, and for a lot of reasons. What that means is, if we won't follow normal mainstream morality, we should stay together forever once we get married, let's say, right? But astrology goes, it's just not that simple at all. Now, not only does astrology say that, life is showing us it's not that simple, just not that linear. That could be a real problem. That's a very, forcing yourself into a social norm. What I'm trying to say is there's cycles and timing to things. So if you are in a relationship and you have that opportunity to be together forever, well, hallelujah, good for you. But don't think it should be like that for everybody, because it's not. And you'll look around and go, if this isn't it. So what we tend to think is because a lot of relationships aren't staying together forever, that the society is falling apart. No. What astrology says, no, it was never really meant to be together forever like that. It's kind of, in other words, we go through changes, we grow, we evolve, we graduate, don't we? And I'm not, when relationships end, for example, it pinches. But think about it. You're a child and you had little friends, and you're in elementary and you had little friends, and in high school you had little friends. I'm talking about? Where are they? Well, there's always there's old friends and new friends, isn't there? Sometimes there's the homies from way back, which is really lovely. But if you're in touch with a deeper voice inside you, that may lead you places away from so-called friend networks if you have certain other things to do. You appreciate that? And it's not always easy and so forth, but we do. So from this spiritual perspective, life is best understood as an evolutionary journey. That's what we're getting to. We are souls, we're evolving through time, and we're, making choices. And what we want to do is make authentic choices if we can, so that and what's woven within this statement is we have a conscious and a subconscious, and we want to come to know what they're saying. And our chart, now the point is, I know this gets a little bit all over the place, but our natal chart actually provides a map of our subconscious. It's our subconscious intent, which is also called our destiny. See, that law of attraction, pretty popular. Do you think that the law of attraction is operating with your subconscious mind? I'm sure you it is. Your being, as a matter of fact, the subconscious mind is the bulk of your consciousness. And most of what's being attracted to you and you're being attracted to is happening subconsciously. Now, I appreciate you can bring to consciousness, an awareness of this is what I want, I'm going to work the law of attraction. But at what point are you just in your ego because you don't know what your subconscious wants? And what you're now is you're just purely socially wired to what society's telling you is valuable, right? So you're just, I'm going to have a house in Malibu and I want 6 digits. Isn't that the big thing right now? That on the internet's a big thing. And you can be and have and do anything you want. That you can be and have and do anything. Well, I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but how about tuning into who you really are And what this does with this understanding is it helps us to, so what I'm getting at, and I'm a bit ahead of myself, is it helps you to redefine success. In other words, we all want the big something. We want the big money, we want the big house, we want the big time and freedom, we want the big whatever, right? The big time. Which is, it's lovely to see people out there successful and having high achievements. There's nothing wrong with that. It's lovely to enjoy and good for them. At the other end of the scale, we can feel jealous sometimes, feel like their life is great, ours sucks. So, sucks to be you, as the saying goes. My sister always says that. There's times, and it does, and it's hard. It really isn't easy, but we can, the goal, and this is sort of a counseling, psychospiritual thing, is to kind of go into, you can't be that. So you can celebrate that, or you can also live your own life, and you can redefine success. Redefine success is the key phrase I'm after. So anyway, with this awakened realization that our perspective, our vision, our philosophy, and focus on life changes, everything I showed you hopefully produces a change. The change is simply a shift of perception to embrace more fully who you are and being more, not just who you are, but learning your lessons or creating your life is, co-creating your life is the key thing. So it gets into this very intimate place of choice and free will and who am I and how am I living my life, etc. And it plugs us into society, of course, wherever we are. So we develop inner strengths, patience, understanding, and appreciation of ours and other people's individuality can emerge. It's one of the things that can come from astrology. We hear that basically when we go, you're an Aries and I'm a Leo, let's say. And that's not my sign, I'm just saying. We can kind of get a sense of separation, or they can come in other language, but astrology does that. So anyway, our intuition gets activated by this inner connection, this inner understanding, and it can resolve clarity about what constitutes our destiny and our purpose. Again, I want to, this is the key phrase, it allows us to redefine success. I want to encourage that as human beings, we live in a time and a place. We live in this society. And this society has a sort of a game, has its own, as I said, the United States, for example, has its own consciousness. As a country, has its own astrology chart. And Canada too. And we're close, but we're slightly different. And there's nothing wrong with living in your time, living in the place you live. Like here you are. There's lots to enjoy and appreciate and celebrate, and here, okay, and whatever the norms of society are is great. But at what point does society tell you you're a loser? You understand what I'm getting at? You're a loser. Or, because you don't do this, because you don't do that, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. You're not doing it right. Or you're an idiot, or you're just crap, or whatever. It's very cold, and just get your shit together. And and there's a lot of depression, a lot of sadness, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of violence, a lot of stuff comes from that. You see, so I believe that astrology can redefine success, but once again, it doesn't mean it's taking you out of your society. It's just helping you become more authentically you and functioning within it. And it doesn't mean you won't still make 6 digits, if that's, or 7 if you like, or 8 if you like. If that's not just your destiny, not just, okay, in other words, by free will and choice I can achieve that. But it's quite possible that I call that success. I achieve, let's say, 8 digits, okay, in my salary. Okay, but if you did that with a lot of pain and suffering, blood, sweat, and tears, and it's not authentic, like Howard Hughes, you understand? People who are wealthy are committing suicide today, right now. It's a crazy thought, isn't it? It's everything we work for and believe in. It's like, are you kidding? Or like Robin Williams, for example. you've got the life we're all after, sort of thing. Basically, because you're having fun, you're successful, you're rich, everybody loves you in the world, you commit suicide. Or Whitney Houston, or it goes on and on and on. They just self-destruct. Now, these are, maybe I'm stretching it a bit, but I'm trying to make a basic point. You get what I'm getting at, right? Is that we can lose perspective, and so we want to be in tune with the times, live in our society, but still be in touch with our authenticity, and it becomes a co-creative journey, and it doesn't mean we have to do anything in particular, and it just becomes a celebration of a more intrinsic value. It's the best basic way I can say it, in a generic sense. So now, here we are, redefining our success as who we are, but we live in time. And again, we live in the now, we live in our time, but this is also meant to represent that in our life, we live in time, and there's only now. And just a little aside, you know when you're feeling a little bothered about things? That's Eckhart Tolle, you've ever heard of him? He says, that's your thinking of the past and the future, and I basically think he's right. And so I personally do my best to practice, have no regret and resentment, and if I have it, I need to just get out of there. And then as far as my anxiety about tomorrow is, get out of there. And you always bring your mind back here. And the way you can do that, by the way, is you can listen to things, or you can touch things, be very tactile, and just give your head a shake, as the saying goes. just know that, because people go through a lot of misery that way. I just want to throw that in. So, the cycles are now, the time in astrology, while we see the clock on the wall, that's measuring the Earth turning on its axis. And the calendar on the wall is the moon going around the Earth on one hand, but it's also the sun going around the Earth, although the Earth is going around the sun, but that's a perceptual illusion. You with me on that one? Although we know the Earth is going around the sun, and I'm not trying to say otherwise, I'm not trying to tell you that Earth is flat either. But some people will try hard. But it appears like the sun's going around us, so it creates this 12-month thing. But that's very month, day, year, sun, moon, earth principle, which is great. It's beautiful. That's what we're doing. It's life. Seasons are woven into that, and day and night. But when we get into astrology, we're looking at where the planets are, and it goes a bit beyond the last visible planet, Saturn, with our naked eye. It goes to Uranus, Neptune, Pluto now, and there's other planets. But we watch them in their cycles, and they're going through, around the sun from the Earth's perspective at varying rates of speed. And as they go, they create cycles. So our astrology measures many cycles. It's really interesting to see how this works. And this is what brings us back to all of these types of questions, these realities of life. Okay, and with all the many apps. So, but now when we get back to our astrology, now all of this story brings us back full circle to that you were born at a certain place, time, with a date, month, and year, and it creates this little mandala, this little archetypal code. Woven within it is your destiny. Now, that map is not telling me about your genetics. It's not strictly telling me about your social, cultural conditioning. It's not telling me about the norms and values of your society. It's not. The map has limitations. Okay? So I'm not trying to pretend and tell you that this, oh my God, every answer in the universe is here. No, but it is a tool, a map, that has a measurement of your conscious and your subconscious, your motivation, your rhyme and reason, your inner purpose, your destiny, your success story in achieving these things, but they are married with your times and your society too. Okay? So we want to keep that alive. But what I'm getting at also is that in your astrology chart, if all that happens is we look at your natal chart, it's the best place to start. Like, you can have questions, and where in doing readings, I find that the least satisfying readings are when a person doesn't care about that. They just want to know things, outcome questions. Oh, when's this going to happen? When's that going to happen? What's going to happen there? Who's going to, they have this notion of it's all outcome. And so responsible astrology looks at who are you? then we can start looking later. But you see, astrology unfortunately has this in this situation due to societal attitudes that it's like, well, we don't really believe in that, but I'll come and see you. Here's $100. Tell me everything. You better be right on every front. And don't and can I have a discount? That's what goes on. And give me a deal. And it's kind of unfortunate and sad when astrology is so sophisticated. So what I want to encourage people to understand is, in your whole life, if you put aside $1,000 for astrology in your life, you've done probably 10 times more than the average person, and 10 readings of your astrology chart in your life would be quite a lot. You can get a lot out of 10 readings, right? Because it can provide a lot of information quickly and in a really deep way. But people don't have that value, and I think to myself, what is wrong with the world? Well, we're talking about the soul and destiny. That's my attitude. See, but remember now, we live in a world, we live in society. It's full of different perceptions, paradigms, philosophies, and there's certain amounts of those want to grab your attention over here. Where are they pulling you? To their value. And then then people say, I live in reality. And it says, well, maybe not. What reality are you living in? You see what I'm getting at? So it's not about negating society, but it's about recognizing that we may be getting led down the garden path more often than we think. And we're out of touch with the deeper sense of who we are and why we are, etc. But you can't neither know all that in an hour. But you can, in an hour or so, get a jump start on it. And you can choose, if you wish, to get more. So over the years, I've developed a certain amount of skill where I can kind of go deep quickly. And I can see various things, but I can't see everything and can't say it all that quickly. So in other words, I've been doing astrology studying it since I was 17, and it's a long time ago, right? I'm still learning stuff about myself through my astrology. It's really remarkable. But yeah, it's like that it gets denigrated because of popular thinking, but it's really profound, and it's amazing what it can see. So what people are basically after and what it can provide is personal insight, self-awareness, self-understanding. And so it can have a very psycho-spiritual, and does have a very psycho-spiritual basis to it. And as is true of all aspects of life, there's many layers, even to the natal chart alone, just like the strata, like our body, skin. We talk about the energy fields, and we go to the skin, and then we go to the beneath the skin, and the muscles and the bones, right? Layers, right? Everything's in layers, everything. So this is just a quick illustration that there's all kinds of, I can draw on all kinds of filters on the lens to add to see different parts of you, but I just do a rather bare-boned approach. But I use Sabian symbols a lot. I have used all of these Sabian symbols. Sabian symbols is a symbolic interpretation of every degree of the zodiac. The zodiac meaning the circle. A circle has 360 degrees. It's very archetypal. So there's 360 Sabian symbols. It's really interesting, wonderful little piece of astrology. So we have a destiny. We have and this examines a spectrum of experiences and lessons we're meant to have to evolve. And we have karma, and there's a plus and minus. And this weaves with the realities of our current incarnation. That's what I've been telling you. Our karma dharma story, our deeper destiny, weaves with our genetics and our consciousness in society as conditioned beings. All good. But we want to be able to see through the conditioning if we can to get to our authentic self. And that's part of the goal. That's a part of the thing. Is what we'll redefine. So in what we're after, basically, when we cast a chart, is we basically require your birthday, month and year, place, and time. But I can do a chart without your time, although it's not as clear. It's fuzzier, but it's still there. And okay, we can do all of that. It's just I can look at one person's chart from a whole spectrum of angles, and one of them is based on time, and that's a very important one. But there's at least a dozen more, even more than that. You'd be surprised. It's like many facets. You're turning the thing over and over. And you say, "Oh, the matter." Many perspectives. It's really amazing how it can do that. Chart rectification means if I don't know your time, I might go through a series of questions quickly to help you decipher what time you were born. It's really quite interesting all on its own ground. But generally, in the United States, I've learned most people know their birth time. Is that true of all of you here? Yeah, it's in Canada, it's less. It's really interesting. But anyway, Americans in the United States, for whatever reason, it was very clearly given, and everybody mostly knows it. It's very refreshing, and Canada's not so easy that way. Anyway, there's medical astrology is one of the things. Now, I'm not a doctor, but it can show me various things about one's health regarding the chart. So I do touch on that. And there's psychosomatic, what that means is the chart shows certain complexes, certain stresses, and it's bound to affect certain areas. Okay, so it's not bad, and it does have a certain amount of ability to see, but it's neither modern medicine all on its own ground. Okay. Now, there's also karmic astrology. So in your natal chart, I will go into this with people right away in their chart. Like they'll sometimes ask me, "What was I in my past life?" Right? So, and even in the first time reading, I'll say, "You are basically that," and usually they go, "I can really relate to that." Like, and sometimes it's somewhat, people wonder if I'm kind of psychic or channeling, and I say to them, I am kind of pretty psychic and empathic. It's true, and intuitive. But the archetypal map of astrology can see stuff without having to think that I'm channeling something. No. It's more archetypal. That's what. But anyway, we can see past lives. Not all your past lives. Mostly the echo of your last life. That's what I'm seeing. The basic imprint that it brought with you. And then it shows karmas. But some of the karmas in your chart go further to further lives. In other words, you've been carrying them for a long time. Wouldn't it be nice to once and for all overcome a certain something? And you can by being aware, but you have to be aware. Otherwise, you're just groping in the dark. And that's what happens, unfortunately. And we see that. That's what they call social malaise. Ever heard that phrase? Yeah, people are like, and it's unfortunate and sad at worst. It's a bit of a travesty at worst. So the question of relationships is important. Now, in relationships, I would say, well, remember the primary relationship's with you, and that's your natal chart. But admittedly, and of course, we're in relationship with others. Sometimes we have problems with our spouse, or sometimes with a child, or a parent, or who knows, right, a colleague. And we can do what's called the synastry, which is like the chemistry. But there's what's called the composite, which looks at the purpose of the relationship, and it creates like a third person. So two people create a third person. And even that third person shows the purpose of why you're two together, and it evolves over time. It's really interesting. It's hard to explain, but it goes through cycles of change. That's what I'm trying to say. As does the chemistry too. But the chemistry, the synastry is like when two people they either have this nice chemistry or they don't. You might notice that people you kind of like that person, but it's hard to like them. And your chemistry is that's why. So try as you may. It's not really their fault or yours, but that's where we feel hurt or resentful, don't we? And we bump into people and we're like, she's such a bitch. And that's my final word on it. The reality is, well, in another language, maybe, or he could be, really not very nice to anybody. And that's the problem too. But the point is we can have difficult chemistry. And the purpose could show, oh, this is not a very fun purpose. So that sometimes happens with married couples, of course. And it's like, understanding our child is one of the things. We want to understand our own child better. And sometimes just the celebration, sometimes because there's issues I get that. People come to me and I can see, I even get a glimpse. I've had a few in the past year, and I thought, these children from the Middle East in their past life, I can see it in their chart. And sure enough, they're like seething, right? And I know that sounds, I'm not meaning to suggest all people from the Middle East are seething. It's just that there's a lot of emotional anguish there. And maybe for good reason. They've been really kicked around at worst. And, it's just that, but they've been beating up on each other forever. So it's just a strange part of the world in that way. But anyway, I really thought that, and they thought that helped them a lot to even have that glimpse. And then I saw other things and helped them. And sometimes the people come to me, and I'll be honest with you, they say, you know what, we've been to all the psychologists, what you just told us in an hour is better than all of them. Faster, deeper, better. They're like, wow. They're like, cool. Okay? So I'm not saying absolutely always, and perhaps it can help them go to the psychologist and have better results. So I'm not trying to dismiss anybody there. It's just, okay, so we want to understand our child. We can understand the cycles our child's in. Like some children, they're in school, they're just not even there, and some are there. So it's not some linear thing that all 6-year-olds are a certain thing, either by their personality or their cycles. So they're really rotten in school, rotten, graduate high school, become a successful, beautiful person. Or little sweetheart, la 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 la, graduates, A's, shoots everybody up. Coffee shop. Stuff like that, I'm sorry to say. Just extreme examples of it's not pat, right? That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. Terrible example, I'm sorry, but just to make a point that it's not just. So, living life with purpose is the magic of why we are here. We want to have purpose, okay? But purpose is, just to fulfill your life. And that's one of the big things people come to, just what's my purpose? And I help them with that. More pragmatically, they're looking for work. What's my career? And some people I say, you know what? You're here to just have a job, and it's the rest of your life that matters. It doesn't matter about your career as much as you think. So don't worry. And they kind of know that, but it makes them feel good. And it really shows that. Or, hey, you're here to have a career. And, how exciting and good for you, but chip chop. So we can come to understand who we are and know where our right vocation. And sometimes I call it your job versus your work, or your job versus your art. And that's, so sometimes it's a strategy how to get there. You say, look, you're an artist, but you need a job. So the job is not what you're about, but you need that to do this. But then I might help them say, do that, but do your homework, and in 3 years, try and cross the bridge. Stuff like that. And then they go, okay, I got a game plan. I know how long it might take me to have to cross that bridge. That's really good. So other things like career, and I can get a sense of person's sense of aptitude, their proclivity, where they're going to probably shine. They already know that, but it's sometimes nice to hear it affirmed, or sometimes I pull it out, they didn't even know it was there. And that's great. They go, and I've been doing this for a long time. People come to me, you know what? I didn't even think about it, but I took what you said, and I went, and I'm doing it now. I'm like, it's very exciting for both of us. And that's very satisfying. The questions like, am I an entrepreneur? Some people have a sense that they are, but they're not necessarily, or they're working for somebody and they should be. So I can sometimes just inspire them. I had a lady yesterday, she was a nurse, and I said, oh, you're a nurse. I said, oh, I wouldn't have thought you're a nurse. And she says, what do you think I am? And she was a little bit back for a moment. And I said, well, something else. I said, it's like a doctor. And I said, I think you're like a doctor more than a nurse. Did you think? She says, I thought of becoming a doctor. And I said, oh, so you're a nurse. Do you like it? She's like, not bad, right? She just started not long ago, not bad. And she says, there's this thing called a nurse practitioner. You ever heard about that? I said, I never heard about it, actually, until yesterday. That's funny. I said, a nurse. She says, well, I've been looking into becoming a nurse practitioner. I said, what's that? She says, well, you're kind of like a doctor, but you're like a nurse. And you go to people's houses, and there's more of an outreach. I'm like, ding, 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 ding. I'm like, you are a nurse practitioner. She says, you know, you might be right. She's kind of getting it now. Now this is yesterday, so where is it at? But I think she liked that idea because I said, it's almost like you're meant to work for yourself, but healing makes sense. But nurse, but that, And her and her husband had a dream vision of traveling in the world. I said, wouldn't that be true that you can take it with you? She says, she said, yeah. I said, she said, I could do that as a nurse too. I said, wouldn't that kind of confine you a bit? Wheels were turning. No. I said, you know, maybe what you should do is just take one course a semester over the years until you get your practitioner license. And then, so, but other people I've seen, I go, you ever think of becoming a nurse? She says, I am a nurse. I'm like, oh yeah, it shows. Yeah. And it's even more exciting when the person's on the phone, they're an engineer. They're like, I don't really believe in this stuff. Are you an engineer? Yes. Oh yeah, it shows that. Truly. You know, or you should be an undertaker. I haven't had a lot of those, but so what we're after is this: to be who you are, to be your own self, to self-actualize, to be you, and that's the success story. But being you means you have lessons. That means you have, you know, certain timing, and if you can, it can help you feel good about being you, and to know what your lessons are, and to become more in tune, and even the word to be accepting of your life. I think a lot of people whip themselves into life. Right? They're whipped into life. They're not happy. And there's, you know, so I've done business mergers, help people, you know, who want to put their two businesses together. When to sign, like just a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, a client who I've seen a couple of times, we didn't quite get to the point of, so how's business going? He says, you know, we're struggling. We're really got this great business. They make this beautiful chocolates, and everything's organic, raw chocolate, and they have this wonderful little business, and it's doing pretty good. But he says, we're always struggling. I said, when did you sign the company into existence? So they tell me, and I go, oh, I look at them like, you should relaunch this business, I said. What that means is that they take the business, they close that business, and they launch it, the same business, in a new name on a new date. You can do that. You relaunch that business, it's like you have this opportunity to do that, and now it's a gamble. But it's not a big gamble. It's inexpensive. There's almost nothing to it. It doesn't even cost hardly anything. And then they get this fresh start. Like, now we're talking, you know. It's like going back into port and taking off on a better ship. Okay, but it's sort of a psychological ship of sorts. But anyway, that happens. And I've done that a fair bit. Okay, so I got that's the same one before with the transits. So mostly people are asking these questions: the who, what, when, and you see these are just basic questions, you know. And the answer is you, who. The plot of your life is the what, and the when is your fate. And I can talk to people just about when things are meant to occur. But as you know, along the way on the road of your life, the journey of your life, you come to these things, don't you? All of this road sign stuff. Your life's in renovation, your operation, or something, your home, or your relationship, or your body, or something. There's always bumps in the road, you know. I don't know, I kind of hit these very often. Even, you know, just because you know things about yourself through your astrology doesn't mean you should stop having these. Right? These don't stop. But you have a sense of when they're coming sometimes. Oh, you're coming to a turning point, and it helps them navigate through it better without, you know, less stress. So we go through these turning points, these challenging periods. And we can talk about how long they'll last. And we can go into their deeper implications, their meaning, etc., etc. And that can be really good. You have a clarity, you have a handle on it. And we can talk about opportunities and strategies. And it comes back once again to free will, choice. And often I'm helping people change their attitude. Just change their attitude. And we've heard that, yeah, it's true, change your attitude. And it's true. But, you know, it helps you be specific in how you change your attitudes. What exactly constitutes a better attitude could come to the fore. So So we're in the world, we're in our action. We're always doing something, by the way. Even we're sleeping. We're sleeping, that's something. It's not as passive as it seems. Okay. But we're talking about our choices leading to actions. And, often these are stuff like this. Is this a good time to move? Where's the place to go? And again, there's two ways of looking at it. Your astrology chart will change if you were here, and if you were moving here, you'd still have your birth chart, but that is called your relocated chart. It tells you how you are there. I help people right down to the line. I'm like, it's not there, it's not there, it's there. And they were looking and looking. This one woman, I have lots of examples. This one woman, she wanted to start a business. She couldn't. I'm like, it's right there. She goes there, and what she was good at, there was a business for sale. That business, she's still doing that business 10 years later. Stuff like that. So it's really great to have those success stories. But also, once again, not only does your astrology change because you go to a different longitude and latitude, but each place has its own astrology. And that is something I know more and more now, but it's not as commonly discussed among astrologers. I need to go, hey guys, if you're just doing longitude and latitude, you're missing something. You have to know the astrology of the state and the city if you really want to get it to help. Because you see, you can have good longitude and latitude, you mean in the middle of Detroit. Now it could work, but it could suck. Because you're dealing with the reality of the place, right? So there's those considerations. It's not just its sign, it's just we have to take into consideration other realities, of course. That's all I'm trying to say. Anyway, is it a good time to sell? I help people with that. Sometimes I can't sell my house, can't sell my house, can't sell my house. I'm looking at the chart, I'm like, raise the price. They're like, are you kidding? I can't sell my house. I said, raise the price. They raise the price to sell the house. They're like, what? I said, well, it's just because you're entering a window right now. You were trying to, it's just thinking that I can sell it at any time. It doesn't really work that way. Is it a good time to travel? It's a semi-superficial question, but it's a valid question to ask. And, sometimes there's places that people want to go versus not go, and it's a tricky one, but there's certain times not to go to certain places. I'm certainly not interested in creating fear, but especially if a person has an intuition, I'll look and I can verify. The progressions are in astrology what's called inner changes that produce outer changes. That's a bit complicated to understand. But people do ask me questions about spirituality, the who, what, where, when, why, how questions and answers are classical. 12-month forecasts, just what's going on this year. Yeah, I can do that. There's two overlapping. One's January 1st to January 1st, like the calendar year, and one's from birthday to birthday. Both are good ways of looking at it. I dovetail them both. Sometimes they're after the 5-year plan. Again, while I answer all these things, I generally want to encourage is that you look at your natal chart first. Okay? Spend your time doing that, and then you can further down the road look at other things. So what in the birth chart I tend to encourage, and this is the way I do it, I do what's called a life reading. It looks at who you are, where you're coming from, where you're going to, where you're at, what's next. Nice spectrum, huh? Now, if you've had your natal chart, you have a handle on that, then we should go and could go at least into the 1-year or 5-year plan or whatever. But one can re-look at their natal chart again and again and again and get new information. So that's important to understand too. So this is my motto: affirmation, inspiration, vision, strategy. So, affirmation just looks at who you are, play back, yes, that's me, da 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 da. And my strengths, my weaknesses, and it just brings them to consciousness. It helps. In that, there's an inspiration to either take action in a certain way or to fulfill certain potentials, etc. And then vision means, your life takes on a bigger kind of perspective of possibility. You start to see new considerations. And then strategy. And that's it. That's a nice overview, nice splash. So there we go, and I hope you enjoyed that and learned some things. And I'm certainly open to any questions or comments. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's a nice look in there, isn't it? Kind of